Welcome to True Crime Case Files. In this episode, we delve into the chilling events that unfolded in Rochester, New York, in March of 2010. A mysterious house fire claimed the life of a 46-year-old woman, Vanessa Robertson. As the ashes settled, a tale of deceit, envy, and betrayal emerged from the embers. In the suburban tranquility of Rochester, New York, Vanessa Robertson, age 46, lived a life emblematic of the American dream. A dedicated mother of three and a valued filing clerk at the iconic photography company Kodak, Vanessa's life was one interwoven with the fabric of her community. Nestled in a four-bedroom home on a street lined with similar manifestations of middle-class aspiration, she was a figure of constancy and warmth. Vanessa's educational journey culminated with a degree from the University of Rochester, an institution renowned for its contribution to research and academia. It was here that she not only honed her professional skills but also met her husband, Andrew, forging the beginnings of their shared future. The world outside her home was in the throes of change. The news cycle of March 2010 was dominated by the Affordable Care Act debates, and the tremors of the Great Recession were still palpable in households and boardrooms alike. Kodak, once a titan of industry, was grappling with the digital revolution, its struggles an echo of the wider economic uncertainty. Despite the tumult, Vanessa's focus remained on the immediate joys and challenges of life. Her eldest was preparing for college, her middle child was navigating the throes of adolescence, and her youngest was on the cusp of celebrating her 10th birthday. Vanessa poured her dreams into her children's futures, envisioning for them a world of possibilities that perhaps she had never dared to imagine for herself. Colleagues at Kodak described Vanessa as diligent and personable, a woman who brought order to the chaos of filing with a smile that seldom waned. Friends spoke of her as the linchpin of her family, a woman whose laughter could light up a room and whose presence was a comfort in uncertain times. In the days before her untimely death, Vanessa was absorbed in the minutiae of life, from planning her daughter's birthday party to navigating the everyday demands of her job. Unbeknownst to her, the threads of her carefully woven tapestry were about to unravel in the most tragic of circumstances. On the cold morning of March 15, 2010, as Rochester residents awoke to the remnants of a winter chill, a grim discovery was made in a quiet neighborhood. At 7:30 a.m., under a slate-gray sky, the smoldering remains of what was once a family home on Maplewood Drive were found. The house, belonging to Vanessa Robertson, a 46-year-old Kodak employee, had been reduced to a blackened shell. The distressing find was made by Diana Hastings, a neighbor and longtime resident of the area. Diana, who had set out to collect her morning newspaper, was met with an acrid smell and a scene of destruction that halted her in her tracks. The Robertson residence, known for its well-kept lawn and the laughter of children, lay in ruins before her. With shaking hands, she reached for her cell phone and dialed 911, her voice quivering as she reported the catastrophe to the authorities. As news of the fire began to spread, local media outlets picked up the story, interrupting regular programming with breaking news alerts. The tragedy quickly became the talk of the town, overshadowing the usual buzz about the upcoming St. Patrick's Day celebrations and the latest reports on the health care bill making its way through Congress. Firefighters, who had battled the blaze through the night, were still on the scene, dousing the last of the smoldering embers when police arrived. It was amid this backdrop of charred timbers and the stark reality of a life interrupted that Vanessa's body was discovered. Positioned in what was once the living room, her remains bore the silent testimony to the inferno's deadly force. The community, just beginning its day, was now united in shock and mourning. The Robertsons, active members of their local church and participants in neighborhood gatherings, were well regarded, and Vanessa's death resonated with a poignant intensity. As the reality of the tragedy set in, the question on everyone's lips was a whispered, "How could this happen?" The Rochester Police Department was swift to respond to the call from Maplewood Drive on that bleak March morning. The first officers arrived within minutes, their squad cars breaking the early silence. The scene they encountered was one of devastation. A family home, once a symbol of suburban stability, now lay in ruins, a stark contrast to the neighboring houses untouched by the tragedy. Detectives Matthew Harmon and Liana Grace, veterans of the force, were tasked with leading the investigation. They approached the scene with a practiced calm, but the gravity of the situation was not lost on them. The air was still tinged with the scent of smoke, and the debris from the fire crunched underfoot as they surveyed the damage. The crime scene was a harrowing tableau. Amidst the blackened remains of the Robertson home, Vanessa's body was found. There were no overt signs of violence, but the circumstances were suspicious enough to consider foul play. The detectives, well-versed in the grim language of crime scenes, noted the absence of personal effects that might have survived the fire, raising questions about the intensity and origin of the flames. As they cordoned off the area, Harmon and Grace directed the forensics team to begin their meticulous work. Using the latest in crime scene technology, including thermal imaging cameras to detect any residual heat sources and accelerant-sniffing dogs to trace the path of the fire, the team combed through the ashes. Every fragment was potential evidence, every clue a possible key to unraveling the mystery of Vanessa Robertson's death. The local media, already abuzz with the healthcare debates and the international headlines of Chile's recent earthquake, now had a domestic tragedy to report. Camera crews and reporters gathered at the perimeter, their lenses and microphones capturing the somber investigation for an audience grappling with the shock of the event. As the day wore on, the community awaited answers. The Rochester Police Department was under pressure to piece together the puzzle of the house fire that had claimed one of their own. For Detectives Harmon and Grace, the task was clear: to bring clarity and justice to a scene shrouded in ash and ambiguity. The investigation into Vanessa Robertson's death led detectives to the doorstep of the first suspect, Eliezer Jones. At 75, Jones was a fixture in the community, known for his stern demeanor and his sprawling farmland that bordered the Robertson property. A property dispute between Jones and the Robertsons had been simmering for months, a fact that did not escape the attention of the Rochester Police Department. Eliezer Jones had lived through the ebbs and flows of rural life and had seen his share of conflict over land and legacy. His farm, a once thriving enterprise, had felt the sting of the Great Recession, and the dispute with the Robertsons over a contested piece of borderland had added to the weight of his troubles. Despite his advancing years, Jones harbored dreams of leaving a prosperous and unencumbered farm to his heirs, a dream that seemed to be slipping through his fingers. When detectives Harmon and Grace arrived to question him, they found Jones in his barn, tending to his equipment, seemingly unfazed by the police presence. His response to their inquiries was laced with indignation. He vehemently denied any involvement in the fire, his voice rising above the clatter of the news reports from a radio perched on a nearby workbench, the voice of a local anchor discussing the latest unemployment figures. A stark reminder of the tense economic climate. Jones's interrogation was conducted with the precision of seasoned investigators. They probed for inconsistencies in his alibi, scrutinized his reactions, and searched for any flicker of guilt that might betray complicity. Jones, for his part, remained obstinate, his replies a mixture of defiance and exasperation. The detectives left the farm with more questions than answers. The Rochester community, still reeling from the news of the fire and the death of one of their own, watched with a mix of curiosity and concern. The investigation was unfolding under the watchful eye of a town unaccustomed to such tragedies, and the spotlight on Eliezer Jones was unrelenting. As the investigation into the tragic fire progressed, detectives turned their focus to Kristen Valmont, a 35-year-old colleague of Vanessa Robertson at Kodak. Valmont, known for her ambitious streak within the company, had reportedly clashed with Vanessa on multiple occasions, leading to a palpable tension in the office that did not go unnoticed by their coworkers. Kristen had joined Kodak during a time of significant transition, as the company struggled to adapt to the digital age in the wake of declining film sales, a struggle mirrored in news reports and business analyses of the time. Her aspirations to ascend the corporate ladder were well known, and she envisioned herself as a transformative figure within the company, capable of steering Kodak back to its former glory. Detectives Harmon and Grace approached the interrogation with a methodical strategy, aware of the delicate nature of office politics and the undercurrent of rivalry that could potentially motivate a crime. They questioned Kristen at the police station, where she presented herself with a composed exterior that belied the seriousness of the situation. Throughout the questioning, Kristen maintained her calm, her responses measured and deliberate. She acknowledged her professional disagreements with Vanessa but firmly denied any personal animosity that would lead to such a heinous act. Her demeanor was cool and collected, even as the detectives pressed her on the details of her whereabouts on the night of the fire. The Rochester community, still processing the loss of one of their own, followed the case with growing interest. Local media outlets, in between updates on the latest iPad release and the unfolding healthcare debate in Washington, kept the public informed of every development. The scrutiny on Kristen Valmont intensified as the police continued to piece together the events leading up to the fire, her professional dreams and ambitions now cast in the shadow of a criminal investigation. On March 20, 2010, as the city of Rochester braced against a persistent spring drizzle, the investigation into Vanessa Robertson's death took a significant turn. Detectives Harmon and Grace received a report that breathed new life into the case. A series of anonymous, threatening emails sent to Vanessa in the weeks prior to her death had been uncovered by the department's cybercrime unit. The emails, traced back to an untraceable source, were laced with vitriol and menacing undertones, digital missives that painted a picture of someone with a vendetta against Vanessa. The discovery of these emails shifted the narrative of the investigation, suggesting that the fire might have been a premeditated act of violence rather than a tragic accident. The Rochester Police Department's response was swift and methodical. The forensics team, equipped with advanced software used to analyze digital communications, worked tirelessly to extract any metadata that might lead to the identification of the sender. Meanwhile, detectives revisited the charred remnants of the Robertson home, searching for any physical evidence that might corroborate the digital threats. The news of the threatening emails rippled through the community, which was already grappling with the economic anxieties of the time, the whispers of Kodak's financial troubles, and the broader implications of the ongoing recession. The case, with its new twist, was now the subject of fervent discussion on local radio shows and in the comment sections of online news articles, as residents of Rochester sought to make sense of the unfolding drama. As the investigation pressed forward, the police remained tight-lipped about their findings, though it was clear that the discovery of the emails had provided a new avenue of inquiry. The Rochester community watched on, hopeful that this latest development would bring them closer to understanding the events that led to the tragic loss of Vanessa Robertson. The Rochester Police Department's search for Vanessa Robertson's killer led them to a third individual of interest, George Stekanovich, a 45-year-old ex-convict whose presence had been noted in the vicinity of the Robertson residence in the days preceding the fire. Stekanovich, with a past marred by criminal activity, had been attempting to reintegrate into society, holding on to the dream of leaving his checkered history behind him. Stekanovich's occupation since his release from prison had been sporadic, with him taking on various odd jobs around Rochester. His transient nature and proximity to the Robertsons' home during the critical time frame made him a figure of suspicion in the eyes of the detectives. Stekanovich's aspirations for a normal life, free from the stigma of his past, were now overshadowed by the investigation. Detectives Harmon and Grace approached the interrogation with the intent to peel back the layers of Stekanovich's recent activities. The questioning took place against the backdrop of a city still in shock, with local news outlets like WRCTV and the Democrat and Chronicle closely following the case, providing the public with a steady stream of updates amidst their coverage of the healthcare bill's progress and the local impact of the economic downturn. During the interrogation, Stekanovich's demeanor oscillated between anxious and defensive. He acknowledged his presence in the area but claimed it was innocuous, related to a potential job opportunity. His responses were tinged with the frustration of a man familiar with being on the wrong side of the law, yet he maintained his innocence regarding the fire and Vanessa's death. The Rochester community, already on edge from the recession's impact on local industry giants like Xerox and Bosch and Lohm, watched as the police delved deeper into Stekanovich's alibi. With each passing day, the pressure mounted to solve the case and provide answers to a family and a city in mourning. The relentless pursuit of truth by the Rochester Police Department culminated in a revelation that would shake the foundations of the Robertson family and the community at large. Andrew Robertson, a 48-year-old engineer at Kodak and the bereaved husband of Vanessa Robertson, emerged as the prime suspect in the case. The economic strain of the Great Recession had left Andrew facing the prospect of unemployment, as Kodak, once a bastion of innovation and prosperity, was now grappling with the seismic shifts of the digital age. Andrew, described by colleagues as a pragmatic man deeply invested in his work, had been harboring a secret that would unravel his seemingly stable life. With Kodak's layoffs making headlines and the financial security of families across Rochester hanging in the balance, Andrew had been silently drowning in desperation. His dream of maintaining the comfortable life he had built for his family was slipping away, and in a moment of profound misjudgment, he set his home ablaze, intending to claim the insurance without his wife's knowledge. On that fateful March evening, as the city contended with the chill of early spring and the local news reported on the burgeoning Tea Party movement's rallies, Andrew had not realized that Vanessa would be home. The fire, intended as a desperate escape from financial ruin, instead became an act of unintended but irreversible devastation. Detectives Harmon and Grace, after painstakingly reconstructing the sequence of events and analyzing the evidence, confronted Andrew with their findings. His facade of stoicism crumbled as the implications of his actions became clear. The man who had sought to protect his family from economic hardship had instead torn it asunder. As the news of Andrew's arrest spread through Rochester, the city was left to grapple with the dichotomy of a man who was both a respected engineer and now a convicted murderer. The case, a stark reminder of the pressures that can fracture even the most ordinary lives, became a touchstone for discussions on the far-reaching effects of the recession. On the evening of March 25, 2010, under the dimming light of an overcast sky, the Rochester Police Department made a decisive move in the case of Vanessa Robertson. Andrew Robertson, a 48-year-old Kodak engineer and the unsuspecting husband-turned-suspect, was taken into custody. The city, still grappling with the economic anxieties of the recession and the uncertainty surrounding local stalwarts like Kodak, now witnessed the dramatic turn in a case that had captivated the community. The arrest occurred at Andrew's temporary residence, a modest hotel room he had retreated to amidst the investigation. Detectives Harmon and Grace, armed with evidence of his ill-fated attempt to escape financial ruin, approached with a warrant. The scene was far removed from the technological advancements and corporate strategies discussed in Kodak's boardrooms or the latest healthcare debates that dominated the airwaves. Andrew's reaction to the arrest was a complex tapestry of emotions. Surprise registered on his face, quickly followed by the dawning realization of the consequences of his actions. The man who had engineered a desperate plan to secure his family's future through an act of arson was now confronted with the irreversible outcome of his wife's death. As the news of the arrest broke, it rippled through Rochester's local media, with reporters from stations like Wham and WGC providing live updates. Breaking into scheduled programming that included March Madness basketball and the latest episodes of popular TV shows. The community, which had been following the case with bated breath, now grappled with the reality that the tragedy was rooted not in random violence but in a domestic spiral gone horribly wrong. The Robertson children, already facing the loss of their mother, were dealt another blow with the arrest of their father. The family's grief was compounded by a sense of betrayal, their private turmoil laid bare for all to see. As the details of the case unfolded, the city of Rochester bore witness to a family's heartbreak and the downfall of a man who had succumbed to the darkest reaches of despair. The trial of Andrew Robertson commenced amidst a climate of heightened public interest. The courtroom, a stage for the unfolding drama, was presided over by a sea of legal professionals, media personnel, and a community seeking closure. Helen Pierce, the prosecutor, stood as a figure of relentless justice. At 52, her reputation was that of a formidable presence in the courtroom, having navigated numerous high-profile cases with a blend of legal acumen and unwavering resolve. On the opposing side, defense attorney Sheila Keller, 47, was known for her persuasive oratory and empathetic approach to the law. Keller's task was to humanize Andrew, to cast him as a tragic figure overwhelmed by the economic pressures that had seized the nation, much like the recession's grip on Rochester's own corporate giants, Kodak and Xerox. As Pierce laid out the prosecution's case, she weaved a narrative of premeditated arson, a desperate act by a man on the brink. She referenced the digital evidence, the financial strains, and the insurance policy that pointed to a motive rooted in economic despair. The courtroom, filled with the hum of whispered speculation, was a microcosm of the wider world, where news cycles were dominated by stories of financial ruin and corporate bailouts. Keller's defense painted a different picture, that of a man who had made a catastrophic error in judgment, without malice or intent to harm his beloved wife. She highlighted Andrew's role as a provider, a man caught in an economic maelstrom that had left him floundering. Throughout the proceedings, the emotional toll on Vanessa's family was palpable. They sat, a portrait of sorrow, their presence a silent testimony to the life that had been so abruptly taken from them. The trial, unfolding under the scrutiny of local media outlets like the Democrat and Chronicle, became a somber reflection of the times, a narrative of personal tragedy against the backdrop of national economic hardship. The somber atmosphere of the Rochester courthouse was palpable as the jury returned with their verdict for Andrew Robertson. After hours of deliberation, which seemed to echo the broader societal deliberations on justice and economic hardship, the jury found Andrew guilty of manslaughter and arson. The decision reverberated through the courtroom, where the tension had been as thick as the March fog blanketing the city's skyline. Prosecutor Helen Pierce, her career marked by a string of successful convictions, stood satisfied with the outcome, believing justice had been served. The defense attorney, Sheila Keller, known for her eloquent defenses and a personal touch that often resonated with juries, was visibly subdued, his expression reflecting the weight of the verdict. The sentencing phase brought a heavy penalty as the judge, attuned to the severity of the crime and its repercussions, imposed a lengthy prison sentence. The gravity of the sentence sought to reflect not only the loss of Vanessa's life but also the betrayal of trust and the breach of safety within the sanctity of one's home. Some in the community felt the punishment was just, considering the deliberate act of setting the fire, while others debated the role of Andrew's desperate financial circumstances, drawing parallels to the leniency shown in some corporate bailouts of the era. The impact of the sentence on Vanessa's family was complex. While some felt a measure of relief, others questioned whether any sentence could adequately address the void left behind. Friends and family, their emotions raw, were divided on whether justice had truly been served. Local news outlets, which had been following the case with the same intensity as the national coverage of the iPad's release earlier that month, now reported on the community's reaction. The sentencing was more than a legal conclusion. It was a moment of reflection on the personal cost of the economic downturn that had swept through Rochester and the nation. In the wake of the trial that had gripped Rochester, life slowly began to move forward. The family of Vanessa Robertson, now navigating a world without her, sought solace in the support of the community and in each other. The children, bereft of both parents, faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives, their resilience a testament to their mother's enduring influence. Detectives Harmon and Grace, who had become fixtures in the media narrative surrounding the case, returned to their duties. The experience, however, left an indelible mark on their careers. They continued to serve with a renewed understanding of the complexities of human behavior and the unforeseen impacts of financial despair. The suspects who had been drawn into the case, Eleazar Jones, Kristen Valmont, and George Stakanovich, sought to reclaim their reputations and move past the cloud of suspicion that had briefly overshadowed their lives. Jones returned to his farm, Valmont to her ambitions at Kodak, and Stakanovich to his quest for redemption. Rochester itself, a city that had witnessed the rise and fall of industrial giants, the ebb and flow of economic fortunes, and now the tragic end of one of its own, continued to evolve. The case had become a part of its history, a story recounted in the pages of the Democrat and Chronicle and discussed in the quiet corners of local establishments. As the memory of the trial faded from the headlines, overtaken by coverage of the 2010 midterm elections or the latest advancements from companies like Apple, the community did not forget the lessons learned. The tragedy of Vanessa Robertson served as a stark reminder of the human cost of economic hardship, a narrative that resonated in the collective consciousness of a city all too familiar with change. Life after the trial was not just about moving on, it was about remembering and finding meaning in the aftermath of loss. For all those touched by the case, the journey forward was one paved with reflection, resilience, and a hope for a future free from such heartbreak. The case of Vanessa Robertson is a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the unforeseen consequences of desperation. In the quiet suburb of Rochester, a family was torn asunder, and a community was left to find healing in the aftermath of a tragedy that was as senseless as it was sorrowful. Thank you for joining us on True Crime Case Files. Until next time, stay safe and keep seeking the truth. Hey, true crime case solvers, interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe, true crime case solvers.